Hello, and welcome to Making Sense of It. This is our gift to you from the Glasser Institute for Choice Theory. And each week we have someone explain to us how they use choice theory. And the thing of it is that it has such depth, and yet it is so simple. And so it's always good to see how other people use it. Our speaker today is a favorite, Jeff Steedman. Hello, Jeff. Good to have you here. And
hello again.
Yes. And he's going to be talking today about internalizing the use of choice theory. So we're ready when you are, Jeff. Let's take it away.
Thank you very much. It's a topic that's very close to my heart, Mona, and I'm enjoying speaking about it. It's an idea that I've developed over the years that choice theory really, when we do internalize it, when we really do get it, it's about doing with people, not doing to. And there's a subtle but very important difference between those two things. So how it came about is I'm a faculty member with Glasser Australia, and over the years, we've had a number of people in both education, but I also worked with a lot of people in business. And one of the things that I discovered is that many, I won't say most, certainly not all, but many of the people who came in with the idea of using choice theory to get people to do what they want, which is about as opposite as you could imagine. Choice theory being. The intent ought not to be to try and control other people. Particularly teachers struggled to let go of that because they had a picture in their heads of how they wanted their classrooms to be, and they maybe had seen or heard of someone talking about choice theory and lead management and thought, oh, I could use that to make my classroom be the way I want. But unfortunately, their focus came from how I make the children do what I want, or if it was someone in business, how I get my employees to do what I want. So shifting that mindset is a really important part of the process for any faculty member. And one of the things that also became very clear to me in working with other faculty members is not even all of our faculty members really understood that in a deep sense. So there were people who were wonderful technicians and know the course content and the principles of choice theory probably better than I do, but they didn't live it. They weren't being that way in their everyday life. And it really doesn't work very effectively if you're doing it to people rather than making it the core of who you are and how you work. So it struck me early on very early on actually, when we were doing certification. We had a wonderful woman who was there with us doing it, and she got all the way to certification, and midway through certification, and she had a eureka moment. And her eureka moment was when she realized, and I remember her calling out and saying, I've got it. It's all about me. And she had a huge grin on her face, and that was our running joke from then on. It was, yes, it's all about you. And she finally got that it was about her changing the way that she operates rather than using this as a tool to get other people to change the way they operate. So what's the difference? Many of your listeners will know this, but I think it's worth going over again. If we were to summarize in a very simple way the difference between internal control psychology and external control psychology. External control psychology, the focus on is very much on if he, she, it, or they are not the way I would like them to be, how will I change them? What can I do to change them? And so the focus is putting energy, effort, and thought into changing the other person. That's the absolute core of external control psychology. And as we know, it's the predominant psychology of the world. Most people do it, not because they're bad people, but because that's what they learned growing up. Their parents operated that way, their peers operated that way, their schools operated that way. And if they went into the workforce, their workforces operated that way. So they learned external control psychology. We're not born knowing it. We learn it. We grow up and we develop that way of operating. Internal control psychology, on the other hand, choice theory, lead management, has a very different focus. And it goes like this: if he, she, it, or they are not operating in a way that is needs satisfying for me, in other words, I'm believing that my needs are not being met, what will I do differently to better meet my needs? So the focus is on what I can do to change the environment that I am creating. Now, as a side effect of that, they may or may not change. That's not the issue, and it's not the focus. But what will change is you will change. And sometimes the change might just be how you think about the situation, your perception. Sometimes it might be the behaviors you're using, or sometimes it might be that quality world picture you've got. The three things that Glasser teaches us that we can change. So when we focus on external control psychology, when we are coming in wanting to use choice theory to change other people, we actually dishonor the whole process. And really, we're not using choice theory at all. And we're not doing lead management. We're back to boss management, maybe with a softer edge, or maybe it's more effective than what we were doing, but it's nowhere near as effective as if we were to internalize choice theory and to make it part of who we are and how we operate. And I think one of the keys to doing that is to ask ourselves those self-evaluating questions, which sets our internal compass, and really determine who we are, what we stand for, what we will do for people, what we won't do for people, what we will ask of them, and what we won't ask for them, but with an internal control focus. And if we do that, if we're very clear about who we are, what will happen is that the environment that other people are in, i.e. their relationship with us, has changed. And all of us are influenced by the environment around us. And again, Glasser teaches us that all we can do is influence. We can't control anybody else, but we can create an environment where our needs can be more effectively met, and in ways that are not abusive of others' needs in any way, shape, or form. And they can learn to meet their needs as well. And they learn more by what we do than what we tell them. And that's something I've very much learned. So in my own development and training, when I watched senior faculty members even behaving in ways that were not congruent with choice theory, with internal control psychology, it allowed me to question why that was and what was happening. And again, these are not bad people. A lot of the time they were not aware that they were even doing it. And it was an interesting process to see that we can be so tied up with external control psychology that, and particularly when we're teaching and trying to influence people, that we start to do it to people rather than continue to hold with how we operate ourselves. So how do we do it? There's a fairly simple process that I believe people can follow. And Glasser outlines it beautifully for us. If we are using, he calls them the deadly habits. I use a slightly different name. I call them the connecting habits and the disconnecting habits. It's the same thing. But if we are using any of the disconnecting habits of criticizing, blaming, complaining, nagging, threatening, punishing, or rewarding to control, then we will be engaging in external control psychology. If we use the connecting habits of supporting, encouraging, listening, accepting, trusting, respecting, and negotiating differences, we are soundly on the track of internal control psychology. And the interesting thing is that very early on, I extended that a little bit more. And when I teach choice theory myself, I really ask people to think about, what are we supporting? What are we encouraging? What are we listening to? What are we accepting? What are we trusting? What are we respecting? And what is it that we're negotiating? And we can put a little bit on the end of each of those. We're supporting people meeting their needs in ways that are not abusive of others' needs. We're encouraging them to do that, to meet their needs in ways that are not abusive of others' needs. We're listening to the needs that they have. We're accepting that those needs will be different to ours. We all have a different needs profile, and that's okay. And we're also accepting that their pictures of how to meet those needs, their wants, may be different to ours, even if their need profile is quite similar. We're trusting that they know what they need most. And we're respecting that those needs are right for them. Only when we do all of that can we negotiate differences, because that's about meeting those needs in ways that are not abusive of the other person's needs. Now, to internalize that, you really need to be consciously practicing that on a regular basis. And modern neuropsychology teaches us that we form neural pathways, but those neural pathways, we always have the option of forming new neural pathways. And even though we may have had those external behaviors, that external control psychology, those pathways from when we were very young, and I know that I have them, and I know that they're still there. If I want to think about them, they're right there, and they pop up immediately. And sometimes under stress, much to my duress, they pop up again. But at least I can recognize them very, very quickly and go, hang on, that's not who I am. That's not how I want to be. I go back to the principles of internal control psychology. Now, I'm not sure that, given that human beings are human beings, that we'll ever get that 100% perfect, but it's okay. We don't have to. I think if we can practice enough forming those neural pathways, then what will happen is that it will become our new default behavior, and it will be rare that we go back to the disconnecting habits and external control psychology. And the best way I can describe that is, I can look out the window and look at my neighbour's lawn. He's just planted a brand new lawn. It's lush and it's growing up, started from scratch. When we first walk across a brand new lawn like that, we'll push the grass down. We'll squash the grass down. If we don't walk on that again, if we never go across it again, grass will pop up. You'll never know that you've walked across it. That's a bit like having a thought or doing a behavior just once and never doing it again. It's not going to leave much of an impression, if at all. However, if we keep walking over that same area of grass, eventually we'll flatten it down and there'll become a track. If we continue to walk over it, the grass that's on that track will die. And if we continue walking on it, maybe for months or even years or even decades, we'll form a divot in the actual earth underneath. And that's a bit like the neural pathways in our brain. The more often we walk them, the more ingrained they become. Now, if I look at my neighbour's lawn and I think, well, we don't want that pathway to be running through the middle of it anymore. And if my neighbour decides that he's going to change that, the first thing he needs to do is to stop walking that pathway. That's the number one thing. So if we come back to our connecting habits and disconnecting habits, the first thing we want to do is stop using the disconnecting habits. That gives a chance for the grass to grow, if we continue with that analogy. From there, we also want to, because we still need to get to our destination, we want to walk a new pathway. And at first, that will be difficult, not necessarily because the new pathway is harder, but because the old one is so familiar. It's right there, it's obvious, it's in front of you. And the temptation can be to walk across it again. If we resist that and continue to walk the new pathway, gradually the old pathway, the grass will grow back, it'll grow up to the same level as the other grass, and to all intents and purposes, it will have disappeared. But remember, the divot in the earth underneath is still there. It never goes away. So we can always call on that old pathway, and sometimes we do, we forget and we go back over it, and it's there. But the more that we walk the new pathway, the more we will form that new neural pathway. And it's exactly the same in our brains, the neural pathway in our brain. The more we practice those thoughts, the better off we are. And I'm reminded in this process of internalizing choice theory of an exercise that was performed at a university here in Australia. They took two groups of gymnasts. One group they showed a new technique to, and they got them to watch it often and visualize it when they weren't watching it. That's all they did. The other group, they got to train on the new piece of equipment with the new routine on a regular basis. After a couple of weeks, they put the two groups together, and it was indistinguishable in terms of their performance. They performed equally as well. What that was about was that just by thinking continually, we form those neural pathways. You don't actually have to be doing it. So the more we practice the thought of internal control psychology, and the ideal way of doing it is to keep in mind and be thinking continually of the connecting habits. I still have on my fridge a fridge magnet with the connecting habits there for me to see, so that I'm constantly reminded of them. And as a practitioner of choice theory and lead management and reality therapy, and a teacher of it through the faculty, I get to remind myself on a regular basis. And in talking about it and thinking about it all the time, I'm constantly renewing and ingraining that pathway, that new neural pathway. But the old one does remain there, never goes away. It's just well hidden, and I don't have to follow it. And if I happen to step off and start down that pathway, I can quickly pull myself up and come back. So when we internalize it, it becomes part of who we are, and we want to get to the point where it's our new default behavior, where we don't have to think about doing it. If we do that, if we get to the point, and I'm sure everybody knows people who are, whether they know choice theory or not, still practice the principles of choice theory. Dr. Glasser was the first to say he didn't invent anything new. What he did was look at what successful people do and basically report back on that and help us all to understand it in a practical way and to be able to consciously develop those patterns of behavior or habits of behavior ourselves. So the more that we can do that, the better off we'll be, but the more we will impact on the environment around us, and others will learn. Now, we're not setting out, that's not the purpose. We're not setting out to make others change, but they will change anyway. A person very much wiser than me, I'm not sure we even know who said it, but the saying is, the only thing constant in life is change. So we will change. And we are influenced to change by the people and the things that are happening around us. And if enough of us are practicing internal control psychology, if we have internalized choice theory, reality therapy, and lead management, if we make it part of who we are, our ability to be trusted enough for other people to take that behavior on increases dramatically. So that's why I'm so passionate about choice theory, doing with, not doing to. And that's what I'd like to talk about today, Mona.
Okay, thank you. That was really, it just brought it out beautifully. Very plain and simple, but yet deep. going back to what I was saying about choice theory, is that it has such great depth, but it is
Yes.
very simple to follow. And at certification, the person had the eureka of, it's all about me. That it is more the way we behave than it is the way others behave. And we have a positive influence on them, but not a control.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And so I like your bringing in the connecting and the disconnecting habits and the little dialogue that you give in looking at the connecting habits.
Yeah.
You know, are we this? You want to repeat that for us?
So which one was that, Mona?
That whenever, like you, I mean, as you were talking about it, I was imagining a office meeting where, you know, all the people were there, that there was been some
Yep.
difficulties, they were all there. And that you as the leader were like going through the connecting habits and you were saying, what do we, or how do we?
Yes. So the key is about those 6 questions. Who am I? What do I believe in? What are my principles and beliefs? What will I do for you? What won't I do for you? What will I ask of you? And what won't I ask of you? It gives you that internal compass that allows you to stay really consistent to being a person who operates in a default manner with choice theory, lead management, and reality therapy. In other words, internal control psychology. And anyone can do it. People love sitting down and creating their internal compass. They actually really enjoy it.
Yeah. And then kind of as a follow-on, you looking at the connecting habits and again asking the employees, how can we connect?
Yes.
How can we?
Absolutely. And the more that we can do that and the more we focus on that, the better off we are. I've just joined a board of actually stepped into the role of being head of the board of a Steiner school here in Australia. I don't know a whole lot about Steiner schooling, but I'm learning. And one of the things we've taken on board with the staff and the environment is to actually use the connecting habits as part and parcel of the way we operate. And one of the first things I asked and invited the board to do was to make that our way of operating. So that up front, when we operate as a board, we have those connecting habits as the principles we follow. And it's very powerful. You're not making people do anything, but when they understand it, they really enjoy it and they want to do it.
Right. And once they sit and get that aha moment that it really is about me, then I like to let them know that you don't have to worry about it as long as you are aware of it. And if you keep that awareness there, you're going to automatically begin to change.
Exactly. That's that neural pathways that I was talking about. The more aware you are, it means you're thinking about it. And just the thinking about it creates our neural pathways. It's neuroscience. It's amazing how much we've learned and how we can really use that to take charge of the process of changing to be the way we want to be. And as I said earlier, to make that our default behavior.
Yes. Making a difference makes a difference.
Yeah, it does.
Yes. Well, thank you very much. And thank everyone that is watching this and will benefit from it. And we'll go ahead and stop the recording, and I hope you will be with us again next week. And in the meantime, have a great life and good mental health.